different windows open when I'm doing these. We're going live on YouTube. So the video recording will stay up there. I usually just trim the beginning until I say welcome to,
Okay.
and the rest stays up there. And I gotta make sure I have that volume off. Perfect. Okay. And now let's just let a few people know we're live. Post. Crap. Post. Let's kill the Twitter one. Oh, well. Let's get rid of that. Okay. Got the YouTube chat window in the corner. Get a drink. Silence my phone. Okay. Sorry about that little bit of a. Welcome back to Startup Talk. I'm your host, the startup coach, founder of Toronto Starts, one of the largest startup communities in Canada. And with me today is Tim Hewson of LegalWills.ca. Welcome, Tim.
Oh, thank you, Craig. I'm very happy to be here.
Tell us about LegalWills.ca.
So LegalWills.ca started back in 2000. So we've been around for 21 years. And we started, it came about initially because I worked at Nortel at the time. So did my co-founder, Henry. We both worked at Nortel. We went out for drinks one time after work, as we usually did. And there were 15 people around the table, and somebody complained that they didn't have a will. And then we went around the table, and although we all had jobs, families, houses, assets, not one single person around the table had a will at the time. And back in 2000, it was the tech boom, .com boom, where you felt that you could put anything online. And we realized it was just a broken system. We realized that, hang on, why is nobody around the table? It's not like we can't afford to get a will. There's something wrong with this system where none of us have found the time to make the appointment with the lawyer, to go, and it's always going to be on the back burner. We're never going to get it done. So we started chatting and saying, there's got to be an easier way of doing this. And there, at the time, there were the basic forms that you could get in Staples. But we thought there's got to be an online interactive way of doing this. So back in 2000, we started to work with some lawyers and launched back in 2001 our first online will service that allowed people to step through it, kind of like tax software to do your taxes. But we were there in 2001, allowing people to write their own wills.
2001, that was a while ago.
It was a while ago. I think we came online the same time as Amazon, but their growth, there was a different trajectory to ours.
Oh, that's too bad. I'd like to get to know who the entrepreneur was when they were younger. What led them to this? So what were you like growing up? Were you a handful for your parents? Were you studious? Were you into music, sports, socializing?
I was big into sports. I was a competitive athlete, a runner, distance runner. So my report card generally said, if he put in the same effort into his schooling as he did into his running, he'd go far. But that was, I think academics was never held my interest. But I did go out of high school. I went to really an athletic university in the UK, Loughborough University, which was known for its running program at the time, still is. So I went there, but I did combine that with, I did a degree in human factors and software design, user interface design. So I was pretty dedicated to my running. So it wasn't like I was that much of a handful, but I always had the side jobs as a kid, like selling stuff to my friends. So yeah, I always had an interest in running a business for sure.
What point?
Yeah, sorry.
At what point did you know you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Like when you were 5, or was it later on?
It was later on because I came over to Canada in the late 90s to work for Nortel. And I think it was during that time at Nortel where we worked it was a huge company, but we had a very on a very fast growing .com vibe to the company at the time. And it was soaring, right? And not everybody knows the history of Nortel. It's a distant past now. In fact, one of my neighbors works at Shopify. Never heard of Nortel. So I know there's a number of young people who don't know the story, and I don't know how well it's been documented, but it was the tech darling. And we really loved it there back in the late 90s to 2000. But then everything started to go horribly wrong. And I lost my love for the corporate world at that time. When you've done layoff after layoff after layoff, and it's 100,000 people got laid off from that company over the years, and then you realize that the corporate life, I couldn't have come out of Nortel and gone into another corporate job. And at that time, because we knew the writing was on the wall and it was synchronous with our discovery about wills, that we were able to overlap somewhat, and we started to work on developing legal wills while we were at Nortel. While Nortel was starting to flounder, then we could build a bit of a safety net for ourselves when Nortel eventually died, and that's what we ended up doing.
I remember Nortel very well. It was definitely a tech darling and was treated like a startup. And the rumors of, they have massages come around to your chair while you're working and all that stuff. That was Nortel back in the day. I also worked at Mercer Human Resource Consulting at the time, when we were doing all your benefits packages. And when things started going bad, we had to redo all of it because a lot of it had to do with stock ownership. And when the stock plummeted, things weren't, we built call centers just to deal with redoing the benefits packages and stuff around Nortel. And it's interesting. I don't want to get into details, but I lived through the history, not quite in the trenches with you, but it was an interesting history. And the fact that, no one remembers Nortel is actually very sad.
Yeah. The massages must have been at a higher management level to my level. I didn't get one.
Canadians seem reluctant to discuss wills. You talked about it, you're sitting around the table at work and with your colleagues and found out, nobody's got a will. So Canadians seem to be reluctant to discuss it with family and loved ones, or even with coworkers. Why are these conversations so difficult, and how can we start making them easier?
Well, I think primarily because it's associated with death. And I think there's definitely this sense of, we're trying to change the message. We're definitely trying to work on changing the message, but there's certainly this sense of, you've written your will. Is there something I should know? Are you sick? Are you thinking of harming yourself? Like what's going on? Why would you write your will? So I think we're trying to change the message to say it's a part of financial planning. So if you've got your financial planning together, you should include a will as part of that. In the same way as if I took out a life insurance policy, it wouldn't necessarily mean I'm contemplating death at that time. So it's no different. We're also in the US and the UK. It's no different there. And 65% of Canadian adults don't have a will. The numbers are the same in the US and the UK. And everybody needs one, but people procrastinate. They put it off. They feel that they can always do it next week if they don't get it done this week. And there's certainly this sense of it being associated with death. And as I say, we're trying to change that message, but in our 20 years, that 65% of Canadians not having a will has not changed. It was 65% when we started. We've done many, 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 many wills. It's still around 65% of Canadians don't have a will.
That's interesting. You've already answered my next couple of questions about, do most Canadians have will, and does everyone need a will? Let me reverse that and says, what happens if you don't have a will?
Yeah.
And something happens, you get hit by a bus.
Yeah. So first and foremost, nobody's in charge. Nobody knows what to do. So everybody's looking at each other saying, okay, what's going on? And I think oftentimes people think, well, the spouse is going to sort of, you've just been hit by a bus. The last thing the spouse wants to be doing is filing a whole bunch of paperwork with CRA and the probate office and all of these things. So your will is going to name an executor. That's the most important part. This is the person who's going to take responsibility for gathering your assets, securing your assets, and ultimately distributing them according to your wishes. So if you don't have a will, there's this whole, everyone's looking at each other, nobody's taking responsibility for what's going to happen. Beyond that, there is a distribution plan for your assets that's set in provincial law. No two provinces are the same, believe it or not. And it doesn't automatically all go to your spouse. If you have children, it's going to be divided between your spouse and your children. And in fact, that what they call intestate distribution hardly ever matches what somebody would ever write in their will. So you're relying on a distribution plan for your assets that usually makes no sense. And furthermore, things like charitable bequests, those mementos, those things that are important to you, that you want your nephew to get your Gibson guitar, or that, none of that's going to happen, right? So you don't have a say in what's going to happen to your assets. So primarily it's a lack of the person being in charge. And also, don't forget, all of your assets are then frozen until somebody proves that there's no will. They've got to go through that process. Somebody's got to be appointed by the courts to be the estate administrator. So everything's frozen up. And so your family's just sitting there waiting for, you know, the difference between having a will and not having a will. When you have a will, the process is very straightforward. You submit the form with the will, and then you're off and running. So there's never, ever a situation where not having a will is a chosen path.
I think you hit the nail on the head a little earlier, where with you can always put off getting a will for some reason. It's in people's mind that they think, I can do this tomorrow because, you know, I'm not, whatever happens is not, today's not my day. And I kind of think a little bit opposite. I even got a tattoo here on my wrist that says memento mori, remember you will die. And it's kind of this specifically is a reminder to live your life like it's your last day.
I have a bracelet. I have a memento mori bracelet.
There you go. And it's great. But, you know, let's be realistic. I know people who, you know, think they got another 50 years to live and they're 60 and they haven't really thought about this kind of stuff. What gets them to change their mind about this is important? It's not about whether you're going to die. It's about leaving a legacy. If you're a business owner or co-owner, what happens, you know, when things, you know, you're gone or your other co-owner is gone, you know, who are you dealing with then? And if it's not written out legally, what happens?
Yeah. So the circumstance where most people write their will is when they've just had to deal with an estate that didn't have a will. So people realize, I am not going to put my loved ones through what I've just gone through, because that was a nightmare. And then people realize that writing their will isn't about them at all. It's about all the people they're leaving behind. So if you care about anybody in your lifetime, take the 20 minutes to write your will and don't leave them with a complete mess. And so many people come to us and said, I've decided to write my will because what I just went through over the last 12 months was horrendous. So there's that. And traditionally, the busiest time of our year is always the first week of January. New Year's resolutions, people say, it's a combination of New Year's resolutions, I'm finally going to get this done, and also people gathering as families and saying, have you written this down anywhere? Have you written a will? And you finally have those family conversations and say, okay, after this, after Christmas dinner, can you go away and make sure that everything's written down? Because you can't assume that sense of everyone knows what I want to happen anyway. I've told you all what I want. That doesn't count for anything. And that's just going to leave a family fight.
So we've established that everyone needs a will. Is there an age you should start thinking about it, or maybe when you have a certain amount of assets?
And this is a key point. And this is one of the great things about moving it to an online business. People always thought of wills traditionally as a once in a lifetime task. maybe a couple of times in their life, because after all, you've got to make the appointment with the lawyer. You've got to go in there. You've got to go through all of that. You don't want it to last. You don't want it to be out of date anytime soon, which is another reason why people procrastinate. They say, I'm going to wait until I get married or have kids or buy the house, or I'm going to wait till my life settles down because I don't want to have to redo this. But their life never really settles down. So by moving it to a service like ours, we encourage people to write their will as soon as they have an awareness of wills. It can be as soon as you're an adult, 18 or 19. But then throughout your life, you can log into your account and you can update it whenever your circumstances change. It's a different in perception of wills. They're not this thing that you do once in your lifetime. It's a living document that you update throughout your life until you get to a point where it becomes your last will and testament, and that's the one you're going to die with. But throughout your life, yeah, you have another child, log into your account, add the other child, add a guardian, set up a trust, boom, download and print a new will, sign it in the presence of witnesses, but now your will is up to date. And so that's what we're trying to convey. It's not just a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Now, you hit on a few things. What's involved in setting up a will? And traditionally, how long does it take? And how much does it cost?
So traditionally, you would make an appointment with an estate planning lawyer. And you would typically go to their office. If you're a couple, you're going to have to typically go there together to coordinate your two wills. And you would usually start by either completing a questionnaire in reception, and it would say, who do you want to be the executor? Who do you want to be the beneficiaries? Things like that. Hand that in. And then the lawyer will prepare the will, and then you will come back at a later date to read through it, check that it's all okay. Hopefully it's all okay. And then you will go through that signing procedure. You have to sign it in ink, on paper, in the presence of witnesses. And then you will have your will. And then you would either store it at home or store it at the lawyer's office. Typically, that's going to cost you anywhere between $600 to $1,000. There are sometimes other documents like a financial power of attorney, a healthcare directive, and things like that that are sometimes bundled in. But we're looking at $800 typically for an estate plan, and maybe more if you're doing it as a couple. So it can quite vary with the lawyer's office as well, because sometimes you will be completing a form, they will be putting it into software, they will be generating your will and getting you to sign that will that's written in software. Other times, if you need real legal advice, complicated estate planning advice, then you're going to draw upon the expertise of that lawyer and their legal training. The price can go up, but then you're getting that custom consultation. Not all lawyers do that. A lot of them do templated wills. So take that templated will idea, transition that to online. And what we've done is basically taken that software that lawyers use, put a user-friendly wrapper over the front, so to allow you as a consumer to go in there and create the exact same document word for word. We use the same legal software that the lawyers would use. You're going to end up with the same document at the end, but instead you're going to do it at home, on your computer, on a phone or an iPad, and it's going to cost you $39.95. Actually, you cut out there.
Yeah, sorry. I said, wow, $40. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it's a pretty clear-cut case of why do wills online. It's easier to keep up to date because, if you got a new car, got a new house, got a new this, got a new that, your financial situation changes, your marriage situation changes, your family situation changes. You might want to keep these things up to date, a few times a year. Have the laws and regulatory climate changed recently to make doing wills online easier or better?
They have. So they didn't for 200 years. they really didn't move very much at all. And we started when we started Legal Wills back in 2000. There was that like e-signing was a thing at that time, but it always excluded wills, and it always generally excluded real estate transactions as well. There were a couple that it didn't allow for, but we felt at a time, oh, digital signatures, that's gonna take over the world. And I listened to your previous podcast with Matthew Gibson from Singraphy. So we work with Singraphy, and the law did change, and COVID brought that on. So you're in a situation where people really, two things. One, people contemplated their own mortality during COVID. Certainly the early stages of COVID, nobody really knew what was going on. And people didn't want to leave the house. So the law, first off, it allowed people to remotely witness. So you could watch each other like we're doing, and I could say, I'm just signing my will here, Craig. Can you just watch me sign it? And I'll sign it, and then I'll put it in an envelope, mail it to you, and then you can sign it. So all of the jurisdictions pretty much changed the laws to allow us to watch each other over a Zoom link to do remote witnessing. But then one or two jurisdictions, BC in Canada, Nevada in the US, allowed for an actual electronic signature and the electronic storage of wills, so they could be stored in the cloud. So we use the virtual signing room from Singraphy and their InkSign technologies that you spoke about last week to do exactly that. So somebody can write their will all online. They can sign it. It's actually very cool technology. So what they do is the document comes up on everybody's screen. Everybody gets a signing pad on their phone. They sign it. The signature appears on screen as they're signing. And then once it's done, they can click and store it in a digital vault that we provide as part of the Legal Wills service, together with an audit trace, a video recording of the whole signing session and things like that. So that law changed just in December of last year for BC. No other provinces have adopted it yet. And it's very puzzling because the number of questions we get about either not being able to find a will. So my dad wrote a will, none of us can find it. What do? You're out of luck. Wills getting destroyed, mudslides or natural disasters where the will is a piece of paper and it's just been destroyed, or fraudulent wills, like people, fraudulently creating a signature for somebody else on a paper document. All of that goes away with e-signing, and yet the legal profession is so concerned about the possibility. Does e-signing open it up to fraud? And it actually does the opposite. It tightens it. So for 200 years, you had to sign it in ink on a piece of paper. And then for the last 6 months, BC have allowed it to be electronically signed.
So you can create wills on LegalWills.ca. Sorry, LegalWills.ca. What exactly else does it do? Storage? You're talking about all these services.
Yeah. So there's two things that we primarily add as over and above the documents, like the legal documents. So one of the key challenges of naming an executor is in your will, you typically say, I leave my entire estate to my brother or my children. I leave my entire estate to my children. Now, your executor then has to figure out the scope of your entire estate. What is that? What are all of your accounts? All of your digital accounts, online accounts, all of your investments, your PayPals, your YouTube channel revenues, and all of those kind of things. So your executor has to somehow gather all of this up. And even writing out your own is a challenge. So imagine trying to do it for your brother-in-law. You've been named your brother-in-law's executor. How on earth are you going to know the extent of your brother-in-law's assets, right? And how do you know when that task is complete and that nothing has gone undiscovered? And there are billions of dollars in unclaimed accounts with the Bank of Canada. These are all accounts that people had that nobody knew existed. So we provide primarily a service called LifeLocker, which is an online inventory of all of your assets. So it's kind of like Everplans. I don't know if you know Everplans. It was big in the US, and they did just that. They did just inventory management to allow you to log into your account and say, oh, I've opened a new bank account. I'm going to put this into my LifeLocker. And then what we allow you to do is you set up key holders, which would probably be your executor, could be your power of attorney. And then if at the appropriate time, your key holder can then log in and see the people to contact, the accounts that you have, your online accounts that need management at this point, what's going to happen to your Facebook account, your LinkedIn, and all of these kind of things as well. So we have tools like that. We also have a vault that allows you to upload documents. So you might put a spreadsheet of all of your user IDs and passwords, or even family photos or recipe books or anything like that you would want to, you may want to pass on to beneficiaries as well. So we kind of made it more of a portfolio of services, moving us away from legal tech to death tech, fintech, those kind of, we want to cover all of those needs.
Now you mentioned $39.99 for creating a will, but
Yeah.
it sounds like you've got all this other stuff. Is there more to the business model?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can come in and write your will for $39.95, no problem. If you want to do an estate plan with the living will and power of attorney, we package that up for a $99 bundle, which includes expressing your funeral wishes, setting up key holders, and then the LifeLocker and the Vault is our premium estate plan. And then we have a couples package as well. But then we also have a subscription service, so that you can, if you wish, write your will and be done. Nothing to pay, no ongoing, nothing to cancel, no ongoing payments. Or what happens at the end of 1 year, you get 1 year of unlimited updates to your legal document. But at the end of that year, if you feel that you're going to need to continue to make updates to that document in the future, you can maintain an account with us for $11.95 a year, or we do multi-year bundles. So, 10 years is $39.95, or you can even do a lifetime one payment at $129.95. So we do have a kind of subscription model as well.
Everyone talks about hustle. What are you doing to get traction and build your audience?
I think most of our traction audience now comes from referrals, word of mouth referrals. So I think it's interesting that, for at least 15 years, I think we were pretty much the only player in this market. So we were saying to Canadians, you can write your will online. And everyone's like, I don't think you can. I think you need a lawyer. And even like you can see some old forum posts on Reddit say this is so not legit. And it really is. So we were trying to convince the world. But what we found is that the acceptance of that has grown over COVID. We saw a massive spike. We get a lot of referrals from happy customers. You look at our testimonials online. So, we also work with B2B relationships as well. We have a partnership with H&R Block in Canada where they sell our estate planning services as well. So it's a combination of direct to consumer, word of mouth, online advertising, and also working with B2B relationships as well.
Now you've expanded beyond Canada. What other countries do you operate in?
We have LegalWills.com in the US and LegalWills.co.uk. And yeah, they were interesting experiences. I mean, most of our revenue still comes in from Canada, but we do support the US, and that helps us actually with people who have assets in both countries. So if you did have a condo in Florida and you wanted to write a will to cover those assets, you can do that with combination with our US Legal Wills service. We have like an expat will, and then you can combine that with your Legal Wills Canadian. Different markets though, and we've had different experiences in the US market and in the UK market.
Speaking of challenges, I like to share both success and failures in the hopes that there's a chance that someone listening won't make the same mistake. Can you tell us a time where you messed up and made the wrong startup decision?
Uh, yeah, we've been doing it for 20 years. So yeah, we've made our fair share. So I think so right from the get-go, I think an honest mistake, I think, would be Legal Wills as a name. I'm not sure it was necessarily the best name we could have come up with. It's very descriptive, but it also makes it difficult to protect. If you want to try and file a trademark for legal will, it's a struggle. So I think we might have been better off back in the day giving us a more hokey brand, like a memorable thing that isn't quite as descriptive as what we came up with. So I think that was one of the challenges. Is once you're there, very difficult to. I sometimes look at companies that change their name and rebrand, and I'm like, man, that takes some balls.
Take some guts.
Yeah, and it would be tough for us to do that now. So yeah, so really think carefully about the name and making sure that you can protect the name, and make it memorable but not too wacky. So so I think that was one. I think early on, I used to waste time doing stuff I wasn't qualified to do. So things like, graphic design, or, just, I tried to do things that would take me forever. Video editing, it would take me forever. And it was never as good as somebody who knew what they were doing. So I think early on, you've got to really know where your skills lie. And that somebody who does a particular area very, very well, even like social media marketing is just not something I'm good at. We pulled in a team to do that, and every time they're creating content, I think, why did I attempt to do this myself? It's just not my skill set. So I think knowing when to pull in expertise and not spend your time as a CEO trying to design your icon, unless you come from that kind of background, like your logos and things like that. So that was one. And I think one other that I would do is that I would say is be very careful with discounting your product. And it's a real, like, setting pricing and discounting is a real challenge, because you early on, you really want to win business. So you want to make that business as attractive as possible. But then what ends up happening is that other people want a better deal than you just offered the last guy. And so you can run into this, like, kind of a spiral down. And so I would try and protect your product as much as you can from discounting it, and setting the pricing right, and knowing that you're offering value at the pricing you're offering. And even now, we're the most affordable will service out there by miles, and we still end up discounting our product, because we have this precedent of having discounted it in the past. I kind of wish we hadn't, because we could just stand proud and say, this is our price, we're still the best value, we're still the best product out there.
Are there any business tools that you'd recommend that you use on a regular basis?
Yeah, we use for live chat a product called Tawk.co, TAWK. My English accent will butcher Talk. So it's TAWK.to. I just think it's a brilliantly implemented application. But it's great if you want to have live chat on your website. We don't get any referrals from it. I just think it's just one of the best tools out there. We have grown very lean, always been very lean with our business. So we've relied on things like 99 Designs, TopTool. We go out and get people we need when we need them. So we use those tools a lot. We did a translation of our website as well. We used SmartCat as a way of managing translation. We ended up going out bilingually with all of our services, and SmartCat was a very useful tool for that.
What's your favorite book for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because I think it's so often quoted, and it's an old book now, but it's The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. The book's, I looked it up, it's 11 years old now, but it's really packed full. And we used it as inspiration for what we did. We're a bootstrap company, and getting to customers and getting to revenue as soon as you can, and everything that's in that book, The Lean Startup, still holds true now. And we would always, I would stand by, like, I've never liked a business model that relies on another round of funding. We've never had external funding, not angel investment, nothing. We've always just worked on our revenues from the business. Granted, as I mentioned early on, we were still working at Nortel, so we were able to fund our bill paying a little bit from Nortel. But in terms of the business, Henry and I think we put in something like $1,500 each, and that was on the initial startup. That was our startup cost, and that was just to incorporate the business, and everything else we did ourselves. So yeah, The Lean Startup is great, but I also like reading business biographies. Shoe Dog, I loved. There's one, Rand Fishkin wrote a great book, Lost and Founder is a wonderful book. And one, if you want just a beach read entertainment, is one called Disruptive, My Misadventures in a Startup Bubble, by Dan Lyons, which is his experience of working for HubSpot. They're good, entertaining reads.
Excellent. You've been in the community for a while. So what resources or communities would you recommend for other starting businesses?
I think primarily it's finding a network. I have a mastermind group that I meet with every other week. I think it's really important that people understand what you're going through as an entrepreneur, and it's different to going to if you go to a counselor or a psychotherapist or somebody, if you're feeling stress and anxiety around your business, they won't necessarily understand what you're going through. They're saying your business is fine, you're doing well. It's like, no, you've got to understand how I need to separate my well-being from my business performance. And I think it's really important to connect with people who have strategies for coping with that, and being able to work with ebbs and flows as a business owner. I didn't even realize, we didn't realize at Legal Wills that writing wills is an incredibly seasonal business. Who would have thought? It is. So, we didn't know that. We just thought, what is going on with our business? It's dying in June. Why isn't anyone writing their wills? Well, it turns out people don't write their wills in June, right? We discovered that. But being able to talk to other entrepreneurs about their challenges, not just with the business, my mastermind group, we talk about search engine optimization and content marketing, and also how are we doing? Like, how do we manage our anxiety? And over 20 years, we still have those same challenges.
I like to say that entrepreneurship is not a solo sport. So find your village, your mastermind, your network that supports you. And, if your friends all have 9-to-5 jobs, they're not going to understand what you're going through. So you need to find a group of people who do. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, I now live in Ottawa. I used to live in Toronto, but I now live in Ottawa, where a lot of people in my neighborhood, they're not entrepreneurs. They're either federal government employees. My friends are profs at the universities, and it's a different world. Like if you've got a gold-plated pension that's going to see you through till you die, it's a different world to working as an entrepreneur. So you wouldn't understand what my day-to-day is.
I couldn't agree more. I think we've covered most of this. Do you have any final tips for founders? I think we covered a lot of them. You gave us 3 or 4 before.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would like to mention is the value of your team and your business, the people you work with. So, I talked loosely about my co-founder, Henry, who we've taken this road together now for 20 years. And he was the best man at my wedding. And I don't know of anybody who could run a business on their own, or run a successful entrepreneur startup on their own. You've got to have a business partner. And that business partner is somebody who you can relate well to, you completely trust. And, I've got to acknowledge that any success that Legal Wills has had is because of Henry Roud. And he's our tech guy, who, one thing that I was told you might ask is about, what are our plans in the future? And here we are 20 years into the business, and we have 100 work items on our backlog that we're still building. We're still building out LegalWills.ca. Henry's still, writing code as a CTO. So doing this without a partner is just impossible. So find a partner who you trust, respect, and can count on through thick and thin. And that would be one of my most important tips, I think.
And you are reading my mind, because my next question is, what is next for you in LegalWills.ca?
Yeah, so we do have, as I say, we know what we want to do. One of the other tips, I think, is listen to your customers. And our customers are always coming back to us saying, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do that? So there's always things that we can build. We are launching into other jurisdictions as well. Can't say too much about it because, we haven't launched yet. We are expanding the geographical reach of the service. We are hopefully getting more B2B partnerships. That's something that I'm responsible for. And as I say, new features coming out all of the time. And we wouldn't, if you'd asked me this time last year, would e-signing have been passed into law? I wouldn't have forecast that. So we always want to be nimble as well for things that are happening in the industry and being able to respond to those. But we need to stay ahead of the competition, and we have some good competitors, and we're determined to continue to be the best product that's out there.
If people want to find out more, where do they go?
LegalWills.ca. The About Us is me. I'm on LinkedIn. We're pretty active on social media, on Instagram and Twitter. So you can find me, connect to me on LinkedIn by all means. And Tim Hewson at LegalWills.ca.
Thank you for taking the time today, Tim. I really appreciate you being part of Startup Talk.
Thank you very much, Craig. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.